Can I introduce our next speaker, who's been very influential in the faculty since its start, is a GP in London, and from Pulse, we have it at the cutting edge. She is one of 50 up-and-coming GPs and a model for everybody juggling with work and family. And I loved some words that the Pulse used. It was about pioneering. She's pioneered things, but I love the other word, which is quietly. For me, that means the best of assertive management. So can I introduce Dr. Nikki Kanani?
So I knew that Pulse would come and haunt me one day. Thank you, Jill, thank you, Peter, and the fantastic faculty team for having me here today as the plenary speaker. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for taking the time to come here at the second faculty conference. And what's lovely is to see some really familiar faces, some friends in the audience. So unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Does anybody recognise that quote? And I'll give you a clue. It's not from any of the big reports that have come out this year about our health service. Yeah, fantastic. It's Dr. Seuss. So it was a story that I was reading to the kids at bedtime on Sunday night, The Lorax. And it's a Dr. Seuss tale about a charming but strangely odd creature who speaks for the trees. And with this coming up, it made me think, who speaks for our NHS? Who asks everybody if they care a whole awful lot? Unless somebody like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better, it's not. So I'm going to ask, do you care a whole awful lot? I won't make you answer it, not right now anyway. So over the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to chart a journey. A story, if you will. I'm not bad at bedtime stories. Chart a journey demonstrating how wonderful our health service is, the challenges that we face, and picking out a few of the tools that I think we have at our disposition to really change health service as we know it and get the future health service happening today. Berwick described the NHS in a way that reminded many of us of how great it really is. He said that his only sentiment for the NHS is his admiration for the NHS, but exceeding that is his hope for the NHS, that he hopes that we will never, ever give up with what we've started. He hopes that we will reaffirm and realise how badly we need and how badly the world needs an example of a health system just as ours, a health system that is free at the point of use, that is confident and excellent. And he hopes that we recognise how badly the world needs an example of this. I don't know if you can recognise Berwick's NHS in that description. I don't know if you can believe in Berwick's NHS. It's difficult. Today we come from a place where the NHS that Berwick describes is really hard to recognise. We come from a place where we all have increasing demands, changing patients, changing needs. We know that care is fractured. We know that there's a looming workforce crisis. We know that this is all packed within a very tightly sealed, very small financial envelope. And it makes it very difficult for any of us to advocate for our health service or to be the Lorax. When Lord Francis spoke about mid-staffs, he said that finally and perhaps of most concern was the widespread culture of denial. And yes, mid-staffs was a horrible scandal, a tragedy, but I think part of what then happened was that we lost some of the faith that we have had in our service, some of the passion that we've had for our profession. That service is 65 years old, the same age as my dad. And my dad has had a really mixed experience of healthcare, right from the time he was quite literally booted out of Uganda by Idi Amin, ended up in a tent, a refugee tent not far from here, and had his first free medical health checkup. He then moved south to London and became the very essence of a community pharmacist, an advocate for his patients, a hub, a port of call for his customers. But over the last 10, 20 years, he's developed a number of very complicated, very complex long-term conditions, and he's suddenly become the patient and the customer. And he's confused because what he's starting to experience isn't the health service that he felt very much that he was part of. What he's starting to experience is a huge number of delays and waste. He's going back and forth more times than he actually spends in his pharmacy now. What's worse than my dad's disappointment is the reaction and the impact that this has had on my mum. My mum is a real stalwart, doesn't cry, never saw her cry, until she phoned me in tears of absolute frustration that she couldn't get something as simple as my dad's blood test to follow, to be followed by an appointment, to be followed by an infusion. Really simple, couldn't get it to happen, ended up in tears. We all have stories like that. We all have stories about patients, about our families, about our friends, something that really strikes a chord. One that changed the trajectory of my career and brought me to where I am today was a young man, when I was a PRHO, a house officer, a young man with Down syndrome who died in front of me. He bled out because he hadn't had the urgent endoscopy that he needed. Now, he might have died anyway, but we don't know that. And suddenly I started to look at the health service in a slightly different way. It wasn't just about this patient, but actually this system that we're working within. And then I saw the lady with metastatic pancreatic cancer who kept leaving her tray of food untouched. And we'd go in and we'd do our ward round and you'd see this plate of food. And actually all she wanted when she was asked was an ice lolly. She knew she was dying. She didn't want gelatinated potatoes on a plate. She wanted an ice lolly. Somebody did get her that ice lolly. Gary, a recurrent alcoholic, he used to come in essentially for a shower and a shave, back into the community. The resources were not there to support him, even when he was ready to change, and he later died, a young man leaving behind a young family. So we know that we need to be clinicians, but maybe there's something about remembering our role as leaders and managers as well. And in Sweden, they talk about the culture is about the fact that we have two jobs, the job that we do, and then improving the job that we do. But that's very difficult on the leadership and management landscape. There's been an epidemic of loneliness where I'm sure many of you will have felt frustrated or more of a rebel or a misfit within your own organisation. And that's definitely the background that I've come from, rebel/misfit/frustrated. So I was a PRHO, and then an SHO and an acute trust who recognised my frustration as passion and helped me to turn that into a voice. They gave me time and space and money. They paid for me to take a year out to redesign some of the pathways that I kept complaining about. And what started as simple pathway redesign became a full-scale redesign of an A&E and the implementation of a community discharge team, which was triple funded across the PCT, the acute trust, and the local authority. Now, that was 7 years ago, but I think some of you will recognise that's still unusual even now. I then moved on to GP training, again found a fantastic medical director and chief exec of our PCT who recognised some energy, some frustration, and gave me a chance, gave me jobs to do alongside my training, winter planning, complicated cross-organisational work, providing screening assurance, and then redesigning services for older people, diabetes, implementing a community diabetic service, moving on more recently, leading for integrated care, CCG exec, and then working with other organisations to develop their clinical strategy, redesigning employee health services, working with a failing organisation as they exited a market because of a national policy that had been interpreted poorly. So a range of things, a range of opportunities where people have said, you know what, it doesn't really matter that you're a trainee. Let's give you a go. Let's try and turn that voice and that energy into something positive. It wasn't always positive. I have taken 10 years to get my GP training, which in some cases is quite a long time. Apart from maternity leave, every post I've taken outside of my training has not been recognised by any of the professional bodies. because it wasn't relevant to patient care. It wasn't relevant to being a clinician. So I've had to face an ARCP panel again and again to try and justify why my portfolio is so different to the portfolio of my colleagues. And I only hope now that my appraisers, as a GP, will be able to recognise the range of very unusual skills that I bring. So times are changing, and we too must change. Bruce Keogh said in his report that the NHS embodies the social conscience of the country. Well, in that case, the frontline clinicians, the trainees, the rebels and misfits embody the powerhouse, the legs and the muscles that are going to provide the solutions, that are going to do the hard work to really change the NHS in the way that it needs to change. By placing trainees and frontline clinicians on every review panel, Bruce Keogh has also placed them at the tipping point of a change to really drive frontline improvement. The story that you'll all know about is NASA. NASA developing their space program, wanting to create a pen that would work without gravity. So a few years later, tens of millions of dollars later, they almost created this pen and then realized that the Russians had sent the cosmonauts into space with a pencil. So what I want you to do is look at your trainees. Stop looking for the pens to change the NHS. Those pencils already exist. You've already got the tools that you need to make some of the changes that we need to make. We have a wealth of motivated and inspiring trainees here today. I've met a lot of them yesterday. I am one, I still feel. Almost half of the membership of the faculty is trainee-led, and we have a cadre of really passionate clinical fellows and alumni. I'd like each and every one of us to find a way today to harness that energy, to give a voice to that frustration, to find those square pegs in round holes, to find those natural innovators and agents for change, people who you work with already, and try and work out how to change their frustration into that positive energy, like so many people have offered me. Find the time, find some money, because it does take a little bit of money, some development, some mentorship and support. Find one person that you can offer this to, so that now you can start to develop a solution to the challenges that we face. So I believe in Berwick's NHS, and I, like the Lorax, care a whole awful lot. I care about the service that my parents get and that they continue to get. I care about how my patients feel when they walk out of my clinic. I care about the services that my population can access. I also really care about the NHS that my two children will grow up being part of. You know, tackling the challenges posed by the health service always feels a little bit like that Mandela quote, it always seems impossible until it's done. Well, I'm confident in the passion that our profession has shown. I'm confident in our ability to harness the energy to be at the tipping point of the evolution that Peter mentioned, or revolution, to tap into the energy of our frontline clinicians and trainees, to help them develop their rebel and misfit ways and make it normal to drive change from the front line. And so I'd like you, metaphorically at least, to raise your pen or your pencil and join me in Steve Jobs' toast, which was, and here is to the rebels and the misfits, to the troublemakers, to the square pegs in the round holes, to all the crazy ones. Because the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world usually do. Thank you.